welcome back to my channel. My name is Brigitte, and if you missed our update video, that was the last one I posted. So now I'm actually going to go into the birth story of our third child, Baylor, and talk about how crazy it was. So if you get squeamish or don't like medical things or bodily functions or birth stories, then this video is not for you. You can just go ahead and click off. I will not be offended. But if those things interest you and you get inspired, then keep watching, because his was an all natural, as were my other two, delivery, and it was very quick and it was very hard. That was the hardest delivery I think that I had, even though with Benjamin I had a natural delivery with Pitocin. I was induced. Brielle came 10 days early and she was all natural, and hers was probably the quickest and easiest, even though it was very hard. And then Baylor's was all natural. He came 10 days early also, and actually weighed the same exact amount that Benjamin did, but Benjamin was 2 days late with induction. Both were 7 pounds, 8 ounces. Brielle was 6'13", and she was 10 days early. So let's get into the story of how Baylor was born. So I had a midwife the whole pregnancy with him and loved her, and she probably saved me from a C-section. The day that I delivered and went into labor, because I went into labor during the day, even though I didn't realize I was in labor, was the day that Brandon had a very important meeting for our business, Made to Homeschool, and it was at 3 p.m. So I actually called out of work that day. The previous day I had off and I had a couple of appointments, and I was still 3 centimeters and about 80% effaced, which was the same basically as the previous week. I was not expecting anything. When I went into labor with Brielle, I had an appointment that day and I was 4 centimeters. So I was thinking, okay, I'm only 3 still, like it's not gonna happen today or tomorrow or the next day. I was figuring about a week still at my appointment the previous day, the day before I delivered. So the day of Thursday, I had contractions like, you know, Braxton Hicks. I had Braxton Hicks for months and months, and sometimes they were strong enough that I didn't want to move through them, but I could talk through them and breathe fine. And I would have them at work, and they would be very sporadic, like maybe 15-ish a day, okay? Thursday, I was having them maybe like every 20 minutes-ish, like 2 to 3 an hour, but very sporadic. Nothing that was super duper strong. I would say they were about the same as they had always been. And so during the meeting, which was 3 p.m., I didn't have any. So for a whole hour to hour and a half, I was like nothing. And then Benjamin had rehearsal that day, so Brandon had to go get him and he left at like 5:15, okay? So right before leaving, I had a couple that were like 20 minutes apart, 15, 10, 20, 30, like just kind of random, right? So he leaves, and while he was gone, I had like my second kind of bloody show. I think I had my first sign of bloody show, which was tinged, was maybe earlier in the day or the evening before. And I had some of what I think was my mucus plug that came out that I saw when I went to the bathroom. I think that was the night before. So I was like, well, things are changing, but it doesn't mean that something's going to happen like that day. So I kind of just brushed it aside. I was like, hey, well, things are progressing, but like it still could be a week, you know. While he was gone picking up Benjamin, he kind of already thought that I was in early labor. He always says that, and he said that with Brielle. I mean, he was right. But I was like, I don't know that anything's happening right now. While he was gone, I had a couple stronger ones, and I was like, you know, maybe my parents should just come get the kids so they can sleep there tonight. It was a Thursday, so they had school. Well, Benjamin had school the next day. And I was like, what if we go in at like 3 in the morning? I was very nervous that it was going to be very quick like it was with Brielle, and I didn't want to not make it to the hospital. And so I was like, you know, it's going to take them at least 20-ish minutes to get here, 20, 30. Then it's going to take us another 20-ish to 25 to get to the hospital. And I was like, I just don't want to have to do that. I'd rather just be able to go if I feel like we need to go and we walk out the door 5 minutes later. So I texted my mom and I was like, hey, you know, I'm not sure, but maybe you should come get them tonight and keep them, and then you can take them to school and stuff. And this was like right before Thanksgiving break, and they had off the whole week of Thanksgiving. So this was the Thursday before. So my mom comes and they said, oh, well, should we finish eating dinner or should we come right now? I said, go ahead and finish eating dinner and then come get them, because Brandon's on the way home with Benjamin, and I just made dinner. I made like a pasta, like a homemade beefaroni type hamburger helper, like a homemade one. So I had already made that, and Brielle was eating. I had a little bit. Benjamin had some when he got home. And then, so they came about 6 to 6:15. They came and got the kids. They hung out for 5 minutes, 10 minutes. I had a couple contractions while they were here. I was definitely having to stop during them, and I was timing them. They were very sporadic still. It would be like 10 minutes, 7 minutes, then 5 minutes later, then 10 minutes later. And I had a screenshot from when I was tracking my contractions with Brielle, and I referred back to it. Actually, Brandon resent it to me. And they were the same, very sporadic, until they got to be about 4.5 to 5 minutes apart. They left about 6:15-ish, and maybe 6:30. And then we ended up leaving about 6:45 to 7, between there. I'm so glad we did leave then, because if I had come an hour later, the pain and contractions that I was having at the hospital right when we got there was way worse. We left, we got there at 7:15-ish, pulled up to the ER, Brandon got out with me, and then he had to go park. We walked in, they put me in a wheelchair and were gonna wheel me to the maternity unit, and he went to go park the car and then came in. So we had already texted our midwife, and so she was already on the way. She met me in the hallway, and I definitely was having contractions in the wheelchair while they were wheeling me to the room. So I got in the room and I changed, and she checked me and then put in some orders, and I was 5 centimeters. So I was like, okay, well, I'm 2 more than I was the day before. So that's good. I'm definitely in labor. And I was like, okay. And so I got on the ball. Brandon came in. And it was really when my water broke that I started having horrible back pain. It was back labor the entire time. And what we kind of figured out after the fact was that even though his head had been down for the majority of the pregnancy, it was kind of like in my hip. And so it probably was on a nerve that every time I had a contraction, it just hit and it just surrounded my whole back. All I kept saying was my back, my back. I was so uncomfortable because of my back. And the labor was actually the same time frame as it was with Brielle, but I didn't have back pain with her. It was just like that low pressure I felt when it was time to push. And it was like, I don't know. But the back labor for Baylor was terrible. And so it made it so much harder. So the whole time that I'm in labor, and especially after my water broke, which was about an hour after getting to the hospital, they were trying to monitor his heart rate, and his heart rate kept dropping, and it was dropping too low to where they were comfortable with it. And so they were constantly pushing on my belly, trying to get the monitor on him to see what his heart rate was. And of course it hurt because I was having such pain and I was all over the place trying to move. I got in the shower for a little bit, and then I was like on the bed, and then I was just so uncomfortable. And then they were pushing on me, trying to get the heart rate. So after the fact, we kind of realized that he had a lower than normal baseline anyways. So like about 115 to 120. So when he would drop, it would go into the 90s. And then I guess there was also like a monitor kind of error, like it wasn't picking it up correctly, is what Brandon said. And so it was rough because they were also constantly like on me and touching me, and it hurts, obviously. Well, because of his heart rate and because of my breathing, I guess, they put oxygen on me. So I had that cord, plus they have the cords of this, plus they started an IV for fluids for me because of everything that was going on. And so my midwife decided, obviously, instead of going to a C-section, which I feel like other doctors would have, she thought, let's try and refill the amniotic fluid with saline, because the thought was he could be on the cord, or the cord could be up, and every time I have a contraction, it could be squished because my water had broken against the head. And that's why the heart rate kept dropping, because of the cord. So they put a catheter up into my cervix, and it was not comfortable, believe me, and had like a drip saline coming in. So I kept feeling gushes every contraction, which they said was fine. But it was another thing that I was like strapped to. But I will say the nurse I had, Leslie, you were a godsend, and my midwife, because they stayed there the entire time. So after my water broke, it was only 2 hours until I pushed him out. So granted, it was not that long, but during that 2 hours, it was torture. And I asked a couple of times, should I get an epidural, because I couldn't sit still long enough for them to keep getting his heart rate. And I was worried about his heart rate, and I was worried I couldn't be in the position long enough for them to keep getting it, and then they were just going to make some other decisions that I didn't want. And so I asked a couple of times. My husband knew I didn't really want one. And honestly, I don't know that I would have stayed still for them to put it in, but they kind of just ignored me. Like, my husband was like, you can do it. You can do it. I know you can. And I was progressing fast enough with dilation because she did check me. I asked to be checked, and I was progressing. So it was fast enough that they were like, she can do it without it. Like, and the nurse actually told us the next morning, because thankfully we came right after a shift change. And so we had the same nurse the whole time. And she was like, I'm really glad you didn't get an epidural, because his heart rate was already low. Your blood pressure is already naturally low. Like, it could have made both of yours go lower, and then you could have ended up with a C-section anyways. And so she's like, I'm really glad that you didn't get it. And she was the one literally holding the monitor basically on my pubic bone the entire time. And I know because I was like up on all fours and leaning over the back of the bed, like, I know I was leaking all over her arm. And I just remember thinking it during labor, like, this girl is like a godsend. Like, I can't imagine a lot of nurses being so hands-on and doing that. And so for a whole like 2.5 hours, she was like holding it and making sure we could get a heart rate on him. So anyway, so after they refilled it, and the midwife encouraged me to try to change positions because his head was causing the back labor, and so probably it wasn't engaged correctly. So I was up on all fours. It was not more comfortable, but I knew just from a lot of reading and stuff that would probably help him to turn. So, like, you know, in my pelvis, he was like facing the side, and he needed to face my back in order to like engage and come down more. And I think once he did that, and the nurse said right before you started pushing, or felt like you said you needed to push, is when his heart rate got even lower. So basically his head did go a little bit lower. And as soon as I felt that inkling of like wanting to push, I was like, let's try. Now, it wasn't as strong as it was with Brielle, and I think that's because of his head not turning. And so basically, as soon as I started to feel a little bit of the urge, I was like, let's do it, because I'm so done with this back labor. So I turned over, and she checked me again, and she was basically like, yeah, you know, if you want to start pushing, like, let's do it. And they got all ready, and I pushed on my back, which I didn't love. So I had one contraction, I pushed, and then I remembered how to push. And then I could feel his head come low, but it was the next contraction, which I actually had a decent break. It was probably a good like 15, 20 seconds maybe that I had a break in between contractions. And I remember her saying, like, sometimes there's a good break in between contractions, even though you're fully dilated. So I had a good break. I was breathing, and then I felt the contraction, and I was like, we're doing this. So I had several, like 3 or 4 good back-to-back pushes, and I was like, in my head, I was like, I know I'm going to tear. I don't even care. Like, I am pushing this baby out right now. So apparently the head came out, and it was stuck at the shoulders, and she was trying to get the cord around, and it was tightly wrapped around his head. And they kept telling me how to push, and I was trying to like hold my breath and push, but then I was like, ah, and then I just remember that feeling, like, if you've ever had a delivery, that feeling when the rest of the body comes out, it's like it's the decompression of your belly, and that, like, it's just the weirdest feeling, but like the best feeling, because then you know it's over. And they put him up on me, and I was going to grab him, and they're like, wait, because he had a very short cord, I guess. And so they had to clamp the cord, and then Brandon cut it, and he was out, and I was so happy. So he stayed on me. They were like rubbing him down, and then it was, a couple minutes after, and then I gave a little push and the placenta came out. Brandon took pictures of it. It was very cool, looked very healthy and good, and then I had to stay. She stitched me up a little bit because I did have a first-degree tear, which is what I had with Brielle too. So not that bad, but those stitches are still healing. And the stitches she used, she said, are like 3 to 4 weeks until they like start dissolving. So they're still dissolving now, but yeah, that was him. It was very fast because it was 3 hours after we got to the hospital, which is basically the same with her. And actually hers was probably like 2.5 to 3. And then his was 3 pretty much on the dot. And Baylor was born 10:21 p.m. And we are so excited to have him. He was very healthy. He had a 2-vessel cord, but that was, basically doesn't matter anymore because he's out now and he's been doing amazing. He nurses great. He doesn't have a tongue tie or anything. He latched right away. And since it was my 3rd time breastfeeding somebody, I already knew how to do it. And so I just, was able to teach him. And then he's been happy and healthy, and we've been trying to switch his schedule so he sleeps more at night, and he's been doing pretty good with that. So 3 to 4 hour stretches.
I love the baby.
Yeah, we'll go get him. And so that is the birth story of
Baby
Baylor.
noise.
And it was very quick, very hard, but all natural, which is what I wanted. I'm so glad I did not get the epidural. I'm so thankful for that nurse, Leslie, and our midwife, Kathy. And I am just so glad that it's done and over and he's here. I'm thankful he came 10 days early. So, that was Thursday night. We got discharged Saturday morning. The kids came home Sunday morning, and then we had the whole week that they were off school, so we did not have to get up early, and we could sleep when we needed to sleep, and it was great. And so, yeah. If you like this video and you like birth stories, make sure you give it a thumbs up. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss when I post new videos, because I'm going to try to post more videos more often now that I am not pregnant and we have a lot going on. And so I have a lot to catch you up on. So until we meet again, don't forget, life is better together.